All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Whether you're a frontline SOC analyst, a security engineer, or a CISO, everything we do in security operations ultimately funnels down to one absolutely critical capability: prioritizing incident response. This is strategy 5 on the path to building a world-class SOC, and honestly, it's the heartbeat of your entire security apparatus. Picture this for a second. A critical alert fires off in a SOC that hasn't actually formalized its response plans. It is sheer chaos. Analysts are scrambling, nobody's totally sure who's in charge, executives are completely in the dark, demanding answers in a business language that the technical team just isn't speaking. And the worst part? The adversary is moving freely through your network while your defense is stuck trying to figure out its own internal processes. It's a total nightmare scenario, but thankfully, it's completely avoidable.
So, to get us from chaos to control, here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the incident response imperative, cover core concepts and playbooks, adapt to modern environments, look at avoiding common pitfalls, build out a world-class SOC, and then wrap up with takeaways and next steps.
Starting with Section 1, the incident response imperative. We really have to ground ourselves in the fact that responding to incidents is the fundamental reason a SOC exists in the first place. Look, if we lean on definitions from institutions like NIST and CERT, incident handling is the absolute core of the job. It's about receiving, categorizing, prioritizing, and analyzing events. If an organization outsources this entirely or just fails to build a real internal capability, that SOC ceases to be a SOC. It literally just becomes an alert factory. It's so important that raw data actually transitions into decisive action. A mature SOC doesn't just sit around staring at dashboards, right? It moves rapidly from initial tip-offs and sensor tuning, straight through in-depth analysis and right into response. And that cycle relies heavily on continuous feedback loops at every single stage. Mature response isn't just about blocking an IP address. It's a highly dynamic cycle of decision-making that brings in the entire constituency.
Moving on to Section 2, core concepts and playbooks. Shifting from that chaotic state into a controlled environment requires structure, and that structure is built entirely on standard operating procedures and playbooks. You just cannot afford to make big decisions on the fly when you're under fire.
When we're talking about playbooks, every single one needs to nail down 4 core elements. First, its intent. Second, its scope, meaning exactly who and what it applies to. Third, the stimulating conditions. Basically, what are the exact circumstances or alerts that actually trigger this thing? And finally, the precise procedural steps to execute the response. By codifying all of this, you're literally saving the next analyst the headache of relearning everything from scratch during a massive crisis. The big takeaway here is that a truly mature SOC categorizes and prioritizes incidents based on the specific mission and risks of their own organization. You can't just copy and paste another company's priorities. For instance, a DDoS attack? That might be a top-tier critical priority for a cloud provider, needing instant auto-mitigation. But what about a research lab whose whole value is intellectual property? For them, unauthorized access to an R&D server is the doomsday scenario. You have to allocate your human brainpower where the business impact is the absolute highest, and just relegate generic stuff like adware to automated ticketing. Now, when things hit the fan, communication is just as vital as the technical containment. When you're briefing executives during a crisis, you absolutely have to translate technical jargon into business reality. Trust me, the C-suite doesn't need a packet capture analysis. They need you to answer 4 very specific questions. What was targeted? Was the adversary successful? Who are they and what do they want? And arguably the most important, how do we continue our business mission right now?
All right, Section 3, adapting to modern environments. Because let's face it, our perimeters have basically dissolved into cloud, mobile, and physical domains. We aren't just defending a single, clean corporate office network anymore.
Every single one of these modern environments demands a totally different tactical approach. In the cloud, your incident responders have to navigate tricky shared responsibility models and figure out how to capture highly volatile logs before they just vanish. For mobile, the boundaries extend way beyond the traditional network. You're looking at examining app data and GPS. And with operational technology, or OT, the stakes escalate dramatically from simple data loss to potential physical damage or even life safety issues.
I really want to hammer this point home when it comes to operational technology. If you suspect an OT system is compromised, never, ever unilaterally isolate it without talking to the device owner first. A standard IT playbook might just say, quarantine the host. But if that host happens to run a municipal power grid or life-saving hospital equipment, blindly quarantining it is going to cause a catastrophic disruption that's far, far worse than the cyber attack itself.
Section 4. Avoiding common SOC pitfalls. Because even with the best playbooks in environmental awareness, SOCs still stumble. They get stuck in these highly reactive, immature cycles that just completely burn out their staff.
Hands down, the biggest missed opportunity we see in security ops is failing to conduct a post-incident review, or PIR. A lot of folks call this a hot wash. This is the engine that drives your continuous improvement. If you don't take a breather after the heat of a response simmers down to figure out together what worked, what failed, and exactly how the adversary got in, you are completely stunting your SOC's evolution.
Organizations that skip PIRs do so at their own peril for sure. If you skip this, you literally trap your team in a relentless, exhausting cycle of playing whack-a-mole against the exact same attacks, day in and day out. That leads straight to over-alerting, severe analyst burnout, and creating a toxic culture where everything is treated as a critical priority. And as any seasoned analyst will tell you, if everything is critical, absolutely nothing is. Which brings us to Section 5, building a world-class SOC. To really elevate your operations and escape that whack-a-mole trap, we need to benchmark against how elite defense teams actually behave. Think about the contrast here. A beginner SOC is purely reactive. It's chaotic, treating every single alert like a massive fire drill. But an elite, world-class SOC, they prioritize proactively. They lean heavily on SOAR capabilities, security orchestration, automation, and response to just handle the low-level, routine threats automatically. That reserves their highly trained human brain power for the really sophisticated adversaries. They build in continuous feedback loops, and they can seamlessly translate those complex technical threats into clear business risk for the CISO. So how do we actually get there? Well, from a purely actionable standpoint, if you want to mature your SOC starting today, you need to implement 4 key steps. You transition your team from a reactive baseline to a standardized state by, first, defining incident categories tailored strictly to your specific business context. Then, you write those playbooks. You allocate your analysts based on true business priority. And finally, you institute mandatory post-incident reviews, no exceptions. Section 6, Takeaways and Next Steps. Let's quickly wrap up the key strategic pillars of Strategy 5 before we look at what's next on our maturity journey. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Incident response is the absolute heart of your SOC. Always base your priorities on your specific business risks, not some generic list. Formalize those standard operating procedures and constantly learn through PIRs. By executing your response with real precision and showing that you deeply care about the organization's core mission, you guarantee the SOC remains a powerful business enabler rather than just a frustrating technical bottleneck. Now, once your incident response is totally locked down and running like a well-oiled machine, you're ready to shift your posture. You evolve from merely reacting to attacks to proactively anticipating them. And that perfectly sets us up for the next stage of a world-class SOC, which is Strategy 6, Illuminate Adversaries with Cyber Threat Intelligence. I'm going to leave you with one final, incredibly important thought. Even if your playbooks are flawless, even if you can respond perfectly to the attacks hitting you today, are you truly equipped to anticipate the adversary of tomorrow? That question right there is exactly what we'll be tackling in our next explainer, where we'll dive into how elite SOCs use intelligence to spot the adversary long before that first alert ever fires. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and we'll see you in the next one.